The sound of the slap silenced an entire cafeteria. For a moment, time seemed to stop. 300 students frozen, phones raised, waiting for the new girl to crumble the way every other victim had. But Laurel Myers didn't cry. She didn't run. She stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on Manuel Cortez with an intensity that didn't belong to a terrified teenager. Then she smiled, small, cold, victorious, and whispered, "You've just made a mistake you can't afford." 3 minutes later, the bully everyone feared was on the floor, sobbing, surrounded by agents with guns drawn. What she revealed next shattered the entire college. Before we dive into the twisted web of lies, corruption, and justice that's about to unravel at Crescent Valley Community College, take a second to hit that subscribe button. If stories about courage in the face of cruelty and watching bullies face real consequences get your heart racing, drop a comment below telling us your thoughts on campus safety and the systems that fail to protect vulnerable students. Your support helps us bring these powerful, real-feeling stories to light. And trust me, what you're about to witness will make you question whether that quiet new girl sitting alone in the cafeteria is ever really just a transfer student. Crescent Valley Community College wasn't Yale or Harvard, but its sprawling Northern California campus served over 8,000 students, many of them young, vulnerable, and far from home for the first time. 2 weeks ago, Laurel Myers had enrolled as a 19-year-old transfer from Arizona State, her paperwork flawless. Forensic biology major, 3.8 GPA, living off campus with a family friend. Her professors found her quiet, diligent, unremarkable. But every single detail of her identity was a federal fabrication. Manuel Cortez, 23 years old and repeating his sophomore year for the third time, ruled Crescent Valley like a warlord in a varsity jacket. Charming to faculty, vicious to anyone who crossed him, he moved through campus with the swagger of someone who believed himself untouchable. And why wouldn't he? His older brother Raphael ran a community outreach foundation that funneled tens of thousands into the college. Nobody asked questions. Nobody looked too closely. Students who got too curious about the supply trucks arriving at odd hours, or the parties where freshmen disappeared for days, learned quickly to keep their mouths shut. Laurel had noticed the pattern on her third day. Raphael's foundation vehicles, white panel vans with cheerful logos, arrived every Thursday at 11 p.m. near the athletic storage units. Manuel always happened to be nearby, smoking, watching, controlling. She'd photographed the vans from a distance using a camera disguised as a compact mirror. She'd tracked delivery schedules. She'd even followed one van to a warehouse 30 miles outside the city limits, where she'd seen crates unloaded under cover of darkness. But she needed more than surveillance footage. She needed DNA evidence, a direct connection, something that would hold up in federal court and bring down not just Manuel, but his brother, and the entire trafficking network that had turned Crescent Valley into a distribution hub. That morning, in her criminology lecture, Laurel had taken notes with a tactical-grade pen, carbon fiber, built-in audio recorder, DNA collection tip. She'd chosen the seat closest to the emergency exit, back against the wall, full view of the room. Her sneakers weren't standard campus fashion. They had reinforced soles and grip patterns designed for tactical movement. Her cardigan concealed a microphone so small it looked like a decorative button. When Manuel and his crew cornered her in the lunch line between 4th and 5th period, she hadn't panicked. She'd staged the perfect collision, bumping into him, spilling his loaded tray of chili fries and soda across the floor. He'd exploded exactly as predicted, shouting, shoving, humiliating her in front of everyone. And when his hand came down across her face in that vicious, echoing slap, Laurel didn't flinch. She'd been waiting for this moment. She'd needed this moment. Because now, with hundreds of witnesses and Manuel's DNA on the tissue she'd discreetly pressed to her bleeding lip, the trap was set. Now the real operation could begin. 2 weeks earlier, Laurel Myers had arrived at Crescent Valley Community College with a single suitcase, a falsified transcript, and a mission that had consumed her life for 18 months. The admissions office had processed her paperwork without a second glance. Transfer student from Arizona State University. Forensic biology major. 3.8 GPA. Parents deceased, car accident 3 years prior. Living off campus with a family friend while working part-time at a local bookstore to cover expenses. The scholarship committee had been moved by her essay about overcoming tragedy and finding purpose through science. Every word of it was fiction, crafted by a team of federal analysts in a windowless office in Sacramento. The truth was far more complicated. Laurel Myers, real name Laurel Catherine Myers, 19 years old, formerly of San Diego, had graduated from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center 8 months ago. She'd scored in the top 2% of her tactical response class. Her marksmanship instructors called her unervingly calm under pressure. Her undercover operations trainer had written in her file, "Myers possesses an unusual combination of empathy and tactical precision. She feels deeply but acts coldly. Dangerous combination in the field. Also the most effective." But none of that was supposed to happen. Not at 19. Not this soon. Laurel had been studying pre-med at UC San Diego, dreaming of becoming a trauma surgeon, living the normal college life of study groups and beach bonfires and complaining about organic chemistry exams. Then her phone had rung at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, 2 years ago. The voice on the other end belonged to her Aunt Jennifer, her mother's sister, calling from a hospital in Sacramento. Tyler, Laurel's cousin, her best friend since childhood, the boy who'd taught her to ride a bike and shown her how to skip stones at the lake, was dead. Overdose. Fentanyl-laced pills he bought at a college party, thinking they were just Adderall to help him study for finals. He was 19 years old, the same age Laurel was now. The funeral had been small, suffocating wrong. Tyler's mother had collapsed at the graveside. Laurel had stood there in her black dress, numb, staring at the casket and thinking, someone did this. Someone sold him poison and walked away. 3 weeks later, a DEA agent named Marcus Collins had approached her at a coffee shop near campus. He'd shown her his badge, asked if they could talk privately. In a back booth, over untouched lattes, he'd laid out photographs. Supply chains, distribution networks, college campuses across California being used as trafficking hubs. Young people, students like Tyler, being targeted, exploited, destroyed. "We know who's doing this," Collins had said quietly, "but we can't get close enough. These operations hide behind legitimate businesses. Campus foundations, student organizations, delivery services. They prey on kids who trust their environment. We need someone who can blend in. Someone with motivation. Someone who understands what's at stake." He'd slid a folder across the table. Inside was a photograph of Crescent Valley Community College. And a name. Rafael Cortez. "This is the West Coast Hub," Collins had explained. "Rafael Cortez runs a community foundation that supposedly provides scholarships and campus improvements. In reality, he's moving hundreds of thousands of dollars in narcotics through college supply chains. His younger brother Manuel acts as enforcement, keeps students scared, controls the social environment, makes sure nobody asks questions." Laurel had stared at the photograph of Manuel Cortez. Young, arrogant, smiling in a varsity jacket. How many kids has he hurt? Directly? We've connected him to at least 7 assaults in the past 2 years. Indirectly, through the drugs his brother distributes. Collins had paused. 43 overdoses in the region. 12 fatalities. Your cousin was number 8. The coffee shop had seemed to blur around her. Laurel had felt something crystallize in her chest, something cold and sharp and unbreakable. "What do you need me to do?" Collins had leaned forward. "Drop out of UC San Diego. Tell everyone you're taking time off to deal with grief. We'll fast-track you through training. 8 months, accelerated program. Then we place you undercover at Crescent Valley. You'll be a student. You'll observe, document, and when the time is right, you'll help us bring them all down." "I'm 19, Laurel had said. "I'm not a federal agent." "No," Collins had agreed. "But you're smart, motivated, and you have a personal connection that will keep you sharp. Most importantly, you're the right age. You can blend in where our seasoned agents can't. Manuel Cortez is 23, still on campus, still playing king. He won't see you as a threat. That's your advantage." Laurel had closed the folder, her hands steady. "When do we start?" That had been 18 months ago. Now, standing in the cramped studio apartment the DEA had rented for her 3 miles from campus. Subsidized housing, exactly what a scholarship student would afford. Laurel studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She'd let her hair grow longer, dyed it slightly darker. Wore glasses she didn't need. Dressed in thrift store cardigans and jeans that made her look younger, softer, forgettable. Her real equipment was hidden. The smartwatch that doubled as a communication device, surgically implanted with encrypted signal capability. The tactical pen in her backpack. The micro camera disguised as a jacket button. The self-defense training that had left her capable of disabling someone twice her size in under 4 seconds. But the most dangerous weapon she carried was invisible. The memory of Tyler's funeral. The image of his mother's broken face. The knowledge that every day she spent on this campus, more students were being fed poison by people who saw them as nothing but profit margins. Her phone buzzed, a text from Collins, her handler. First day tomorrow. Remember your cover. You're grieving, quiet, trying to start over. Nobody remarkable. Nobody threatening. Just another student trying to survive. Laurel typed back. Understood. She set the phone down and opened her laptop, pulling up the files she'd been studying for weeks. Manuel Cortez's schedule. His known associates. His patterns, where he ate lunch, which buildings he frequented, which students he targeted. Raphael's foundation meetings. Supply truck arrival times. Campus security rotations. She'd memorized every detail. Studied every angle. Wargamed every scenario. But she'd also studied the victims. Students who'd overdosed. Students who'd been assaulted and too terrified to report it. Students who'd transferred out suddenly, or dropped out, or simply disappeared from campus life. Tyler's photo sat propped against her laptop screen. Him at 17, grinning in his high school graduation gown, full of dreams about studying engineering and changing the world. I'm going to get them, Laurel whispered to the photo. All of them. I promise. The next morning, she would walk onto Crescent Valley's campus as a nobody. A quiet transfer student with a tragic backstory and modest ambitions. She would sit in the back of classrooms, eat lunch alone, keep her head down. And she would watch. Document. Prepare. Because Laurel Myers understood something that Manuel Cortez, in all his arrogance and cruelty, had never learned. The most dangerous people in any room are the ones nobody notices. The ones who sit quietly in corners, observing, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Manuel Cortez ruled Crescent Valley through fear and violence. But fear was temporary. Violence was loud. Justice, when it finally came, would be silent, until the moment it wasn't. And then everyone would hear it. Manuel Cortez had learned early in life that fear was currency, and at Crescent Valley Community College, he was obscenely wealthy. At 23, he should have graduated years ago. But Manuel had failed out twice. Once for academic dishonesty. Once for a physical altercation that had sent another student to the hospital with a broken jaw. Both times, his older brother Raphael had made substantial donations to the college's infrastructure fund. Both times, Manuel had been quietly reinstated with a clean record and a stern warning that existed only on paper. The third time was the charm. This year, Manuel wasn't even pretending to try. He strutted through campus in his Letterman jacket, a relic from high school football glory, back when scouts had actually noticed him before he'd blown out his knee and his NFL dreams along with it. Now the jacket was just armor, a symbol of the athlete he'd almost been, worn to intimidate freshmen who didn't know any better. His crew, 6 loyal followers who'd attached themselves to his orbit like remora to a shark, trailed behind him most days. There was Diego, his cousin, built like a linebacker and twice as mean. Marcus and Javier, former high school teammates who'd followed Manuel to Crescent Valley and never left. Then the hangers-on Kyle, who dealt weed on the side, Brandon, who had a fake ID connect, and Tommy, who mostly just laughed at Manuel's jokes and kept his mouth shut. They called themselves the Cortez Crew, though everyone else called them something less flattering. But Manuel didn't care what people called him behind his back. What mattered was what they did to his face. They lowered their eyes, stepped aside in hallways, handed over homework answers when he demanded them. They understood the social contract of Crescent Valley. Manuel Cortez took what he wanted, and you let him, or you paid the price. The cafeteria was his throne room. Every day at noon, he'd hold court at the center table, the one with the best view of the entire dining hall. Students would orbit around him, maintaining careful distance, like peasants avoiding a medieval lord's notice. He'd point at freshman girls and rate them out of 10, loud enough for everyone to hear. He'd steal food off other students' trays, a cookie here, a soda there, just to watch them freeze in submission. He'd mock the scholarship kids and the nerds, and anyone who wore clothes from Walmart instead of designer stores. And nobody stopped him. Not the cafeteria staff, who'd been warned by administrators to avoid escalating situations. Not the campus security guards, who'd learned that Rafael Cortez's foundation paid their overtime bonuses. Not the professors, who'd been told that the Cortez family was important to the institution's financial stability. Manuel had learned the system, and he'd learned to exploit it perfectly. But there was more to Manuel's reign than simple cruelty. There was purpose behind the chaos. Purpose he didn't fully understand himself. 3 years ago, Rafael had pulled him aside after another suspension, in the living room of their family's sprawling house in the hills outside town. Their parents had been in Mexico visiting relatives, leaving the brothers alone in the too large house that drug money had built. "You're wasting your potential, Hermanito," Rafael had said, pouring them both expensive whiskey that Manuel was technically too young to drink. "All this fighting, this chaos, you could be using it." Using it for what? Manuel had asked, nursing his split knuckles from the fight that had gotten him suspended. Rafael had smiled. That cold, calculating smile that made him so successful in business, both legitimate and otherwise. "You know what our family does, right? You're not stupid, Manuel. You know where the money comes from." Manuel had known. He'd always known. The foundation was a front. The community outreach was theater. The Cortez family fortune came from powder and pills, from desperation and addiction, from exploiting people too weak to save themselves. "I know," Manuel had said quietly. "Good." Rafael had leaned forward. "Then you understand why I need you at that college. Not as a student. Fuck the degree, you're never finishing anyway. I need you there as protection. As insurance." "What kind of insurance?" "The campus is a distribution hub, Manuel. We move product through the supply chains, food deliveries, maintenance shipments, foundation donations. It's perfect cover. But it only works if the students don't ask questions. If they're too scared to notice the trucks coming at odd hours. Too intimidated to talk to campus police about suspicious activity." Rafael had refilled Manuel's glass. "That's where you come in. You keep them afraid. You make examples of anyone who gets curious. You create an environment where students are more afraid of you than they are of whatever else they might see." Manuel had felt something shift in his chest, a mixture of pride and unease. "You want me to be the bad guy. I want you to be useful," Rafael had corrected. "You're good at intimidation, little brother. You always have been. So intimidate. Rule that campus. Make sure nobody looks too closely at our operation. Do that, and you'll never have to worry about money again. Fuck up and..." Rafael's smile had vanished. "Well, let's just say our business partners don't tolerate mistakes." That had been 3 years ago. Since then, Manuel had perfected his role. He'd learned to identify the students who asked too many questions. The curious ones, the social justice types, the campus newspaper writers. He'd learned to shut them down with public humiliation, with threats, with just enough violence to send a message without triggering police involvement. Last year, a journalism student named Rebecca Simmons had started writing an investigative piece about irregular donation patterns to the college. She'd interviewed staff, requested records, asked uncomfortable questions. Manuel had cornered her in the library, surrounded by his crew, and told her exactly what would happen to her younger sister, a high school sophomore, if the article ever saw print. Rebecca had withdrawn from Crescent Valley 2 weeks later, transferred to a college 3 states away, and never spoken about it again. That was how you controlled a campus. Not through rules or authority, but through fear that was personal, intimate, impossible to escape. Still, there were moments, rare, fleeting moments, when Manuel wondered if he'd become something monstrous. Late at night, alone in his apartment, paid for by Raphael, of course. He'd scroll through social media and see the posts students made about him. The memes calling him a psycho. The support groups for his victims. The anonymous testimonials from students too afraid to report him officially, but brave enough to whisper their trauma into the void of the internet. He grabbed me in front of everyone, and nobody helped. I transferred classes just to avoid him. I dropped out because I couldn't handle another year of looking over my shoulder. Sometimes, in those dark hours, Manuel would feel something like guilt. He'd remember the kid he'd been before the knee injury, before the failed drug tests, before Raphael had pulled him into the family business. He'd been different once, still arrogant, still hot-headed, but not cruel. Not deliberately. But then morning would come. Raphael would text him instructions or remind him about a shipment arriving Thursday night. The crew would show up at his door, ready to follow him around campus like he was somebody important. And Manuel would put on his Letterman jacket, swallow whatever doubts had surfaced in the darkness, and go back to being the king of Crescent Valley. Because what else was he going to do? Get a real job, finish his degree, become a normal person who followed rules and paid taxes and worried about retirement savings? No, this was his life now. This was his purpose. He was Manuel Cortez, the most feared man on campus, protected by family money and institutional cowardice. And he was untouchable. The Tuesday before Laurel Myers bumped into him at lunch, Manuel had been in his apartment when Raphael stopped by unannounced. His brother had looked stressed, unusual for someone usually so controlled. He'd paced the small living room, running his hands through his hair. "We've got a problem," Raphael had said. "What kind of problem?" "The DEA kind. There's chatter. They've been asking questions about the foundation, about campus deliveries. Nothing concrete yet, but it's making our partners nervous." Manuel had felt his stomach tighten. "You think they're investigating us?" "I think they're investigating someone, and we're in the ecosystem, which means we need to be more careful. No unnecessary attention. No incidents that put campus security on high alert." "I'm always careful," Manuel had protested. Raphael had shot him a look. "You put a kid in the hospital last month. He was stealing from the supply room. You told me to handle security issues. I told you to be discreet." Raphael had stopped pacing, his voice dropping low and dangerous. "Listen to me, Manuel. The next few weeks are critical. We have shipments coming through worth more money than you've ever seen. If anything draws federal attention, if campus police start actually investigating instead of taking our money and looking the other way, we're finished. And by finished, I mean prison. Or worse, depending on how our partners decide to handle loose ends." The threat had hung in the air between them. "What do you want me to do?" Manuel had asked. "Keep your head down. No more hospital visits. No more viral social media incidents. Just maintain the fear level. Enough to keep students quiet, not enough to trigger outside intervention. Can you do that?" Manuel had nodded. "Yeah, I can do that." Raphael had studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You're my brother, Manuel. I'm trying to protect you. But you have to meet me halfway. Be smart. Be controlled. This isn't high school anymore. The stakes are life and death." After Raphael had left, Manuel had sat on his couch, staring at his phone, trying to convince himself he was in control, that he was smart, that he was managing things correctly. But deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, Manuel Cortez knew the truth. He wasn't managing anything. He was a blunt instrument, pointed at targets by his brother, barely understanding the larger game being played. And in that ignorance lay his greatest vulnerability. 2 days later, Manuel had been walking to class when he'd noticed the new girl. She'd been sitting alone in the cafeteria, eating a salad, reading a forensic science textbook. Quiet, unremarkable, the kind of student who usually escaped his notice entirely. But something about her posture had caught his attention. She sat with her back to the wall, full view of the room. Her eyes would flick up periodically, scanning, observing. Her movements were economical, precise. It had reminded him of something, though he couldn't place what. Diego had noticed him staring. "You know her?" "New transfer," Manuel had said. "Started last week, I think." "She's pretty," Marcus had offered. "Want me to go talk to her?" "Nah." Manuel had watched her for another moment, then shrugged. She's nobody. Forget it. And he had forgotten. Dismissed her as just another face in the crowd, another invisible student in the ecosystem he controlled. It was the biggest mistake of his life. Because if Manuel Cortez had been paying attention, if he'd been as smart as his brother needed him to be, he might have noticed the way Laurel Myers tracked his movements across the cafeteria, the way she documented his schedule, the way her eyes were never afraid, only calculating. He might have noticed that she wasn't trying to avoid him. She was studying him, waiting for him, setting a trap that was already closing around him, inch by careful inch, with the patience of someone who understood that justice delayed was not justice denied. It was justice sharpened to a point that would cut all the deeper when it finally struck. The trap was set. Now Laurel just needed Manuel to walk into it. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Northern California campuses look like movie sets. Golden sunlight filtering through oak trees, students sprawled on lawns pretending to study, the smell of coffee and fresh-cut grass mixing in the air. Laurel sat in her 9 a.m. criminology lecture, positioned in her usual seat, back row, corner, near the emergency exit. Professor Davidson was droning on about forensic evidence chains and the importance of maintaining sample integrity. Ironic, considering what Laurel was about to do. Her tactical pen lay on the desk, disguised among regular school supplies. To anyone glancing over, it looked like a standard ballpoint, black, unremarkable, the kind you'd buy in a pack of 12 at any drugstore. But the tip contained a microscopic collection membrane designed to capture DNA from skin contact. The body of the pen housed a miniature audio recorder that had been running since she'd entered the classroom. She'd been documenting everything: Manuel's patterns, his crew's movements, the campus security rotation schedules. But documentation wasn't enough. The DEA needed physical evidence, something that would hold up in federal court, something that could tie Manuel directly to crimes his brother's money couldn't explain away. Her phone vibrated silently in her pocket. A text from Collins, her handler. DNA match confirmed from your preliminary samples. Subject Manuel Cortez connected to 3 assault victims via trace evidence. We need fresh sample with documented chain of custody. Today is the day. Execute Phase 3 on your signal. Laurel's finger hovered over the keyboard. Phase 3 meant public confrontation. It meant exposing herself to danger, triggering Manuel's temper in front of witnesses, collecting evidence while cameras rolled. It meant stepping from the shadows into the spotlight. It meant becoming a target. She typed back. Understood. Initiating at 12:15 p.m. Cafeteria. Confirm tactical support in position. The response came seconds later. 2 mobile units ready. Agents Rodriguez and Chun inside campus perimeter. Medical team on standby. We've got you covered, Myers. Be smart. Be safe. Laurel exhaled slowly, steadying her pulse. Around her, students were packing up their bags as Professor Davidson dismissed the class. She remained seated for a moment, running through the plan one more time. Step 1. Engineer collision with Manuel during peak lunch hours. Make it look accidental. A clumsy transfer student who doesn't know better. Step 2. Trigger his temper. Manuel's file showed a pattern. Humiliation in public made him violent. He needed to dominate, to reassert control immediately. Step 3. Collect DNA sample during the confrontation. Skin cells, hair follicles, saliva. Anything that could be processed and matched to evidence from previous crimes. Step 4. Document his response. The more witnesses, the better. Social media would do half the work. Step 5. Survive the encounter. Wait for the signal. Let the professionals finish the job. Simple. Clinical. Just another operation. Except this operation could end with her in a hospital. Or worse. Laurel stood, shouldering her backpack, and walked out into the California sunshine. She had 3 hours before lunch. 3 hours to prepare mentally for what came next. At 11:47 a.m., Laurel entered the cafeteria. The lunch rush was building, students flooding in from morning classes, the food service workers shouting orders, the clatter of trays and silverware creating a wall of ambient noise. Perfect. Chaos made for better cover, more witnesses. Harder for anyone to claim later that they'd seen what really happened. She grabbed a tray and moved through the line slowly, selecting items she had no intention of eating. A sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. Her heart was beating faster now, adrenaline beginning to sharpen her senses. She could feel the weight of the microcamera button on her cardigan, the tactical pen in her pocket, the smartwatch on her wrist with its hidden panic signal. Through the crowd, she spotted him. Manuel Cortez stood near the beverage station, surrounded by his usual crew. He was laughing at something Diego had said, gesturing broadly with a plate loaded with chili fries and a double cheeseburger. His Letterman jacket hung open, revealing a gold chain that probably cost more than most students' monthly rent. Laurel watched him for 30 seconds, timing his movements, calculating angles. He would walk past the condiment station in approximately 90 seconds, based on his usual pattern. The floor there was slightly uneven, old linoleum that buckled near the structural support beam. Students tripped on it regularly. Maintenance had been promising to fix it for months. Perfect. Laurel moved into position, approaching from his blind side, her tray balanced carefully. She slowed her pace, timing it exactly. 60 seconds. She could see Agent Rodriguez now, dressed as a maintenance worker, emptying trash cans near the far exit. His hand was near his radio. Watching. 45 seconds. Manuel shifted toward the condiment station, his crew following like a pack of wolves. 30 seconds. Laurel adjusted her grip on the tray, loosening it slightly. Her other hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around the tactical pen. 15 seconds. She stepped forward, just as Manuel turned toward the drink machine. The collision was perfectly choreographed. Her shoulder bumping his elbow, his loaded plate tilting, the chili fries and soda cascading down in what looked like pure accident. The crash echoed through the cafeteria. Manuel's food splattered across the floor, orange-red chili sauce spreading like a crime scene, ice cubes scattering, the bottle spinning. His expensive sneakers were soaked in soda. His jeans were stained with grease and sauce. The cafeteria noise dropped by half as students turned to look. Laurel stumbled backward, her own tray clattering. An Oscar-worthy performance of clumsy embarrassment. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you, Manuel's face transformed. The casual arrogance evaporated, replaced by something darker, more primal. His eyes went cold. His jaw clenched. The muscles in his neck stood out like cables. "You stupid bitch," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Perfect. Exactly the reaction she'd predicted. "It was an accident," Laurel said, her voice deliberately shaky, playing the scared freshman. "Please, I'll help you clean. Do you know how much these cost?" Manuel gestured at his ruined sneakers, his voice rising. Students were pulling out phones now, sensing drama. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I'm sorry, I really didn't mean." "Shut up." Manuel stepped forward, invading her space. Diego and Marcus moved to flank him, blocking her exit routes. The crew was forming a wall, trapping her in the confrontation. Exactly as planned. Laurel's hand was in her pocket now, the tactical pen positioned correctly. She just needed him to make physical contact. One touch, one shove, and she'd have his DNA on the collection tip. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Manuel grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. There. Contact made. In one smooth motion, Laurel let the pen slip from her pocket as she stumbled, dragging it across the back of Manuel's hand as she caught herself. The collection membrane activated on contact, capturing skin cells and sweat. She palmed the pen immediately, securing it before anyone noticed. Sample collected. But Manuel wasn't done. His humiliation was public now. Dozens of students watching, recording, posting in real time. He needed to reassert dominance, needed to make her pay for making him look foolish. "You're going to replace these shoes," he said, pushing her backward. "And my jeans. And you're going to apologize. Right now. On your knees." The cafeteria had gone almost silent. 200 students watching, waiting. Laurel played her role perfectly. She lowered her eyes, her voice trembling. "Please, I don't have money for." "I don't care." Manuel was shouting now, his face flushed with anger. "You think you can just walk into my school, disrespect me, and walk away? You think you're special? You're nobody. You're just another scholarship rat who doesn't belong here. His hand was raised now, finger jabbing at her face. Aggressive. Threatening. Almost there. Just a little more. I'm sorry, Laurel whispered, letting tears well in her eyes. A trick she'd learned in undercover training, thinking about Tyler, about his funeral, about all the victims Manuel and his brother had destroyed. Real tears for a fake moment, but Manuel saw them as weakness, as victory. He smiled, that cruel, satisfied smile of someone who'd just reasserted their dominance. That's better. Now get down and… Manuel. A sharp voice cut through the tension. Professor Davidson had appeared at the edge of the confrontation, her face stern. That's enough. Both of you come with me to the… This doesn't concern you, Manuel snapped, but his body language shifted. Authority figures made him cautious, even when he was protected by family money. It concerns me when students are being threatened in my cafeteria, Davidson said firmly. Miss Myers, are you all right? Laurel nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm fine. It was my fault. I should have been more careful. Manuel shot her a look, part warning, part satisfaction. Yeah, more careful. I'll buy you lunch to replace what's spilled, Laurel offered, her voice still shaky. And I'll pay for cleaning your clothes. I work part-time, so it might take a few weeks, but I promise. Forget it, Manuel said, his anger cooling now that he'd made his point publicly. Just stay out of my way from now on. Got it, Laurel whispered. Manuel turned away, his crew following, leaving her standing among the spilled food and scattered ice. Students were already returning to their conversations. The drama over, the entertainment concluded. Some were still recording, posting videos to TikTok and Instagram with captions like, "New girl got destroyed," and "Manuel Cortez doesn't play." Professor Davidson touched Laurel's shoulder gently. Are you sure you're all right? We can report this to campus security if you feel threatened. No, really, I'm fine, Laurel said, managing a weak smile. I'm just embarrassed. I should have watched where I was going. Davidson hesitated, clearly unconvinced, but finally nodded. If you change your mind, my office hours are posted. You don't have to handle situations like this alone. Thank you, Professor. As Davidson walked away, Laurel bent down as if to clean up the mess, using the motion to shield her face from the remaining cameras. She tapped her smartwatch twice, the signal that Phase 3 was complete, sample secured. Her earpiece crackled softly, Colin's voice barely audible. Good work, Myers. DNA sample is priority 1. Get it to the drop point within the hour. We'll process and run comparisons. If it matches our assault victims, we move to Phase 4. Laurel stood slowly, carrying her tray to the disposal area. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. But inside, her mind was racing. Phase 4 meant the endgame. It meant provoking Manuel one more time. Publicly, violently, with federal agents ready to intervene. It meant putting herself in real danger to trigger the arrests that would bring down not just Manuel, but Raphael, the entire trafficking network, everyone who'd profited from pills that killed kids like Tyler. She glanced across the cafeteria. Manuel was at his usual table now, his crew gathered around, laughing about something. He'd already forgotten her, already moved on to his next target, his next petty cruelty. He had no idea that the scared freshman he'd just humiliated was a federal operative. No idea that the DNA on her tactical pen would connect him to assault victims from 3 different cities. No idea that the countdown to his arrest had just begun. At 1:30 p.m., Laurel stood in a bathroom stall in the library's 2nd floor, a location she'd scouted weeks earlier for its lack of security cameras. She carefully sealed the tactical pen in an evidence bag, labeled it with the case number Collins had provided, and documented the chain of custody on a digital form that would automatically timestamp and encrypt. Her phone buzzed. Package received. Rodriguez has it. Lab team will have preliminary results in 6 hours. If it's a match, we execute Phase 4 tomorrow. Same location. Are you ready for this? Laurel stared at the message. Tomorrow meant the cafeteria confrontation. The moment when Manuel's temper would explode in front of hundreds of witnesses, when she would have to defend herself, when tactical teams would breach the campus, when everything she'd worked toward for 18 months would either succeed spectacularly or fail catastrophically. She thought about Tyler, about the photo on her laptop, about the parents who'd buried their children because people like Rafael Cortez saw human lives as nothing but profit margins. She typed, "Ready. Let's finish this." That evening, back in her apartment, Laurel sat cross-legged on her bed, reviewing the tactical briefing Collins had sent. Phase 4 layouts, agent positions, emergency extraction protocols, medical team coordinates. Every detail mapped and planned. But plans had a way of falling apart when violence became real. She opened her laptop, pulling up the video footage from the cafeteria that afternoon. Someone had already posted a compilation on social media. Crescent Valley Bully Destroys New Girl. Complete with dramatic music and slow-motion replays of Manuel shoving her, shouting in her face. The comments were predictable. "Manuel is such a psycho. Why doesn't someone stand up to him? That poor girl looked terrified. Campus security is useless." They had no idea. None of them understood that the poor girl in the video was trained in tactical combat, armed with federal authority, and counting down the hours until she could dismantle Manuel Cortez's entire world. Tomorrow, those same students would post very different videos. Tomorrow, their comments would be very different. Laurel closed the laptop and lay back on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She ran through the plan one more time, visualizing each step, preparing mentally for the chaos that would follow. Somewhere across town, Manuel Cortez was probably at a party, or playing video games, or bragging to his crew about how he'd put that scared transfer student in her place. He was sleeping soundly, secure in his untouchable status. He had no idea that tomorrow would be the last day of his reign. No idea that the trap had already closed around him. No idea that justice, when it finally struck, would be swift, public, and utterly devastating. Laurel set her alarm for 6 a.m. She needed to be sharp tomorrow. Focused. Ready. Because tomorrow, the quiet girl nobody noticed would finally show Crescent Valley Community College exactly who she was. And Manuel Cortez would learn the hardest lesson of his life. Some mistakes can't be fixed with family money. Some prices must be paid in full. Friday, 12:14 p.m. The cafeteria was at maximum capacity. Over 300 students packed into the space, the noise level approaching chaos. Laurel stood in the lunch line, her heart beating steady and controlled despite what was about to happen. The DNA results had come back at 3 a.m. Collins had called her personally, his voice tight with vindication. Perfect match. Manuel's DNA on 3 separate assault victims, including one who's been in a coma for 6 months. We have him, Myers. Phase 4 is approved. Execute at your discretion. Now watching Manuel hold court at his center table. Laughing, gesturing with a slice of pizza, completely unaware, Laurel felt a strange calm settle over her. This was it. The moment 18 months of training, weeks of observation, and a lifetime of grief had been building toward. She collected her tray and began moving through the crowd, navigating toward Manuel's table with deliberate purpose. Her tactical pen was in her pocket. Her smartwatch showed a single green light, agents in position. The micro camera on her cardigan was recording everything. Outside, in 2 unmarked vans, 12 federal agents waited for her signal. Manuel noticed her approaching and his expression shifted. Recognition, then amusement. Well, look who it is. Clumsy girl. Learn to watch where you're walking yet. His crew laughed. Diego elbowed Marcus, whispering something that made them both snicker. Laurel stopped 3 feet from his table. Actually, I wanted to apologize properly. For yesterday. For making you look bad in front of everyone. Manuel leaned back, arms crossed, enjoying this. Yeah, and what makes you think I give a shit about your apology? Because I think you're better than how you acted, Laurel said, her voice carrying just enough for nearby tables to hear. Students were starting to pay attention, sensing drama. I think you're scared, and you use fear to control people because you don't know any other way. The smirk vanished from Manuel's face. What did you just say to me? I said you're scared. Laurel took a step closer. You're scared that without your brother's money and protection, you're nothing. That's why you hurt people. Because deep down, you know you're just a 23-year-old dropout playing pretend gangster. The cafeteria was quieting now. students turning to watch. Phones were rising. Manuel stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. His crew stood with him, forming a wall. You've got a death wish, transfer girl. No, Laurel said calmly. I've got a conscience. Something you wouldn't recognize. Manuel's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist, hard enough to hurt, hard enough to bruise. You think you're clever? You think you can talk to me like this in my cafeteria? Your cafeteria? Laurel didn't pull away. She met his eyes directly. This isn't your kingdom, Manuel. And you're not untouchable anymore. Anymore? He laughed, bitter and angry. What are you going to do about it? You gonna cry to campus security? Call your mommy. Everyone here knows how this works. I do what I want. And right now, I want you to shut your mouth Before you what? Laurel's voice was ice. Hit me? Like you hit me yesterday? Like you hit Jessica Martinez last semester and put her in the hospital? Like you hit David Chun so hard he needed surgery to fix his jaw? Manuel's grip tightened painfully. How do you? Oh, I know a lot of things, Manuel. Laurel glanced at her watch. The light blinked twice. Agents were 30 seconds from breach position. I know about the Thursday night deliveries. The warehouse outside town. Your brother's foundation. That's actually a front for narcotics distribution. I know about the students who've overdosed. The families destroyed. The lives you and Raphael have ruined. Manuel's face went white, then red. You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Laurel pulled out her phone with her free hand, showing him a photograph. Raphael entering the warehouse, loading crates into a van. Funny thing about surveillance. It catches everything. For 3 seconds, Manuel just stared. Then his other hand came up. Fast, violent, a closed fist aimed at her face. Laurel moved. Years of tactical training compressed into a single fluid motion. She twisted her captured wrist, breaking his grip with a leverage technique that used his own strength against him. As he stumbled forward, off balance, she pivoted, redirecting his momentum. Her foot hooked behind his ankle. Her palm struck his shoulder. Manuel Cortez crashed to the floor. The cafeteria erupted in gasps and shouts. He tried to get up, rage and humiliation fueling him. But Laurel was faster. She dropped to one knee, catching his reaching arm and bending it into a control hold. Not hard enough to break, but painful enough to stop his resistance. Her other hand pressed firmly between his shoulder blades, pinning him face down against the cold linoleum. Stop struggling, she said quietly, professionally. You're only making this worse. Get off me. Manuel was crying now, tears of pain and rage streaming down his face. Someone get her off me. Diego. Help. But Diego was frozen, staring in shock. The entire cafeteria was frozen. Laurel's voice was calm, almost gentle. Manuel Cortez, you're being detained under federal authority. You have the right to remain silent. What the fuck are you? Manuel sobbed, his voice breaking. Someone who cares about the people you hurt. Laurel increased pressure slightly, keeping him immobile. Someone who knew Tyler Myers, 19 years old, engineering student, overdosed on fentanyl-laced pills your brother distributed through this campus. I don't know anyone named. He was my cousin. The words came out harder than she intended. And you're going to pay for what happened to him. What happened to all of them. She pressed her lips close to her collar microphone. Delta to command. Target secured. I have visual confirmation of assault on a federal operative. Subject is detained and controlled. Authorization to breach. Colin's voice crackled in her nearly invisible earpiece. Copy that, Delta. Breach in 10 seconds. Outstanding work. Manuel was hyperventilating now, his body shaking under her hold. Please, I'm sorry. Whatever you think I did, I can explain. Explain it to the prosecutors, Laurel said. She glanced up at the sea of faces, students with phones recording, capturing every moment of the campus bully's breakdown. Some looked terrified. Others looked satisfied. A few were crying. Near the back, Professor Davidson stood with her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with understanding. Timer's up, Laurel whispered, checking her watch one final time. 3 minutes, just like I promised. That's how long it took to end your reign, Manuel. 3 minutes. The cafeteria doors burst open. Federal agents flooded in, tactical vests gleaming under fluorescent lights, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands that turned the space into controlled chaos. And Manuel Cortez, the man who'd terrorized Crescent Valley Community College for 3 years, who'd believed himself invincible, protected, above consequences, lay sobbing on the cafeteria floor, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless. Justice had arrived, and it was absolutely terrifying. The first black SUV arrived at 12:17 p.m., sliding into the faculty parking lot with practiced precision. Inside the cafeteria, Manuel was still on the floor, his wrist bent at an unnatural angle in Laurel's grip, tears streaming down his face as he sobbed uncontrollably. Students stood frozen, phones raised, capturing every second of the campus bully's complete breakdown. Federal Protocol, Section 47, Laurel said calmly into her hidden microphone, her knee pressed firmly into Manuel's back. Subject Cortez detained. Proceed with breach. The cafeteria doors exploded open. DA agents flooded in, 12 of them in tactical vests, weapons drawn, moving with military precision. Students screamed, scrambling backward, knocking over chairs and trays in their panic. The careful choreography of lunch hour dissolved into pure chaos. Everyone down. Hands where we can see them, Agent Rodriguez commanded, his voice cutting through the pandemonium like a blade. Laurel released Manuel and stood smoothly, raising her hands to show she was compliant. Rodriguez approached, his face professionally neutral. Miss Myers, please step back from the subject. She moved away, watching as 2 agents hauled Manuel to his feet. His face was red and blotched with tears, snot running from his nose, his expensive jacket torn at the shoulder where he'd hit the floor. What the fuck is happening? Diego shouted, trying to push through the crowd toward his cousin. Get your hands off him. You can't just. 2 agents intercepted him, forcing him against the wall. Stay where you are, sir. This is a federal operation. Agent Collins entered through the main doors, his badge held high, his expression grim and satisfied. He surveyed the scene, the terrified students, the scattered lunch trays, Manuel crying and struggling weakly against the agents restraining him, and nodded once at Laurel. We got him. Manuel Cortez, Collins announced, his voice carrying across the silent cafeteria. You're being detained for questioning regarding assault, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and obstruction of a federal investigation. I didn't do anything. Manuel's voice was raw, desperate. This is insane. Call my brother. Rafael will. Rafael Cortez is already in custody, Collins said coldly. Arrested 40 minutes ago at his office downtown. Would you like to see the warrant? The color drained from Manuel's face. No, that's impossible. Rafael doesn't, he's not. Collins pulled out his phone, showing Manuel a photograph. Rafael in handcuffs, being led from his foundation office by federal agents, his expensive suit jacket pulled over his head. Manuel's legs buckled. The agents holding him had to support his weight to keep him upright. Your brother's operation is finished, Collins continued. We've seized his computers, his financial records, surveillance footage from the warehouse facility. We have testimony from 3 of his distributors who've already agreed to cooperate. The entire trafficking network is compromised. He stepped closer to Manuel, his voice dropping. You're 23 years old. You still have a chance here. Cooperate with us. Tell us everything you know about the operation, about the people your brother worked with, and we can talk to the prosecutors about reduced charges. I want a lawyer, Manuel whispered. I'm not saying anything without. His phone, still on the floor where it had fallen during the takedown, began buzzing. All eyes turned to it. Collins picked it up, studying the screen. Encrypted message. From a burner phone purchased in Tijuana 3 weeks ago. The message reads, Shipment confirmed. Friday drop. Warehouse B, 11 p.m. Delete this. He held the phone up for the cafeteria cameras, for the dozens of students still recording. That's what we call evidence, ladies and gentlemen. Real-time coordination of narcotics trafficking. Manuel's face crumpled. He began sobbing again, his whole body shaking. Please, I didn't know everything. Rafael just told me to keep people quiet. I didn't ask questions. I didn't. You assaulted students, Collins said, his gentleness evaporating. You terrorized this campus for years. You enabled a distribution network that's killed 17 people in this region, including a 19-year-old kid named Tyler Myers. Laurel's chest tightened at her cousin's name spoken aloud. Collins continued. So no, Manuel. You don't get to claim ignorance. You don't get to play victim. You made choices. Now you live with consequences. He nodded to the agents. Get him out of here. Processing downtown. Full medical evaluation, then holding until arraignment. As they dragged Manuel toward the doors, he looked back at Laurel. Really looked at her for the first time. Recognition dawned slowly in his eyes. You. This whole time you were. Justice, Laurel said quietly. That's what I was. The cafeteria doors closed behind him with a metallic bang that echoed like a cell door slamming shut. The space erupted. Students talking, crying, demanding answers. Collins approached Laurel, his expression softening. Clean work, Myers. Textbook operation. But Laurel felt hollow. This was supposed to feel like victory. Campus security found the supply room, Collins continued. Exactly where you said it would be. 20,000 pills, cash bundles, falsified distribution records. And we found something else in Raphael's safe. Evidence of a larger network. Someone he reported to. Codename Spectre. Laurel looked up sharply. How large? International. Multiple countries. Your cousin's death? Connected to something much bigger than the Cortez brothers. Around them, agents were interviewing witnesses, documenting evidence, transforming the cafeteria into an active crime scene. Collins handed her a folder. Take a week. Heal. Then we talk about what comes next. Because Spectre needs to be stopped. Laurel took the folder, her hand steady. Outside, sirens wailed. Justice had arrived at Crescent Valley. But the war was just beginning. By 2 p.m., Crescent Valley Community College had transformed into a federal crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off entire sections of campus. News vans lined the perimeter roads. Satellite dishes extended toward the sky. Reporters shouting questions at anyone who'd talk. Helicopters circled overhead, their cameras capturing footage that would dominate every news cycle for days. Inside the administration building, chaos reigned. Dean Patricia Morrison sat in her office, flanked by 2 federal agents, her normally perfect composure shattered. Papers were scattered across her desk. Financial records, email printouts, photographs that told a story she'd spent 3 years trying to hide. Agent Collins stood by the window, arms crossed, watching her squirm. The Cortez Foundation donated $340,000 to this institution over the past 3 years, he said quietly. Athletic facilities, library renovations, scholarship funds. Very generous. Almost suspiciously generous. We vetted every donation, Morrison said, her voice tight. Everything was legitimate. I had no knowledge of. You had knowledge, Collins interrupted, dropping a folder on her desk. We pulled your emails. September 2023. Rafael Cortez personally invited you to dinner at his estate. You discussed campus security concerns and managing student complaints. 2 weeks later, 3 students who'd reported suspicious activity near the supply docks mysteriously had their complaints dismissed without investigation. Morrison's hands trembled. That doesn't prove. January 2024. Collins continued relentlessly. A campus security guard named Marcus Webb tried to report late-night delivery trucks to local police. You personally intervened, had him transferred to a different shift, then quietly fired him 3 weeks later for performance issues. Rafael Cortez sent you a thank you gift, a $5,000 spa retreat. We have the receipt. I was protecting the institution's reputation, Morrison whispered. You were protecting drug traffickers. Collins leaned forward. 17 overdoses in this region, Dean Morrison. 12 deaths. Students whose parents trusted this campus to keep them safe. And you took money to look the other way. The dean's face crumpled. I didn't know anyone would die. I thought Raphael was moving marijuana, maybe some party drugs. I didn't know about the fentanyl. I swear I didn't know. Ignorance isn't innocence, Collins said coldly. You're being placed on immediate administrative leave. Federal prosecutors will review your case. If I were you, I'd start looking for a very good lawyer. Outside, on the main quad, students gathered in confused clusters, trying to process what had happened. Social media had exploded. The cafeteria videos, Manuel's breakdown, Laurel's takedown, the federal breach, had gone viral within minutes. Hashtags were trending. Hashtag Crescent Valley Raid. Hashtag Justice for Tyler. Hashtag Undercover Hero. TikTok compilations showed Manuel's 3-year reign of terror in brutal montage. Clips of him bullying students, shoving freshmen, making girls cry, all ending with footage of him sobbing on the cafeteria floor. The comments were merciless. Karma is real. This is what happens to bullies. I'm crying, this is beautiful. That girl is a legend. But not everyone was celebrating. Near the student center, a group of Manuel's former victims stood together. Some crying, some holding each other, all of them processing years of trauma that had suddenly, violently been validated. Jessica Martinez, the girl Manuel had hospitalized the previous year, sat on a bench with her hands covering her face. Her friend Elena had an arm around her shoulders. I thought no one would ever believe me, Jessica whispered. I filed 3 reports. 3. And they all disappeared. We believe you now, Elena said firmly. Everyone believes you now. Across the quad, Professor Davidson was being interviewed by campus police, providing testimony about the incidents she'd witnessed but been powerless to stop. Her voice shook with barely controlled anger. I reported him 7 times, she told the officer. 7 times I documented his behavior, filed official complaints, begged administration to intervene. And every time, I was told the Cortez family was important to institutional funding. Well, congratulations. Your funding just cost you everything. In the campus security office, evidence was being cataloged at a frantic pace. The supply room Manuel had protected yielded horrors. 20,000 fentanyl-laced pills, $180,000 in cash, falsified distribution records showing drugs disguised as medical supplies for the campus health center, encrypted phones, burner laptops, a ledger detailing every transaction for the past 18 months. But the most damning evidence came from Rafael's personal safe. Agent Rodriguez held up a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with handwritten notes. This is a roadmap. Every distributor, every campus connection, every payoff. Rafael kept records of everything. Insurance, Collins said grimly. He knew if the operation ever went down, he'd need leverage against his partners. Rodriguez flipped to a marked page. Here. Spectre requires monthly reports. Production targets must be met or face consequences. And this, a phone number with a Mexico City area code. Collins photographed the page with his department-issued phone. Get that to Intel immediately. If we can trace Spectre's communications, we might finally identify who's running the entire network. By evening, the media narrative had solidified. News anchors spoke in grave tones about a shocking undercover operation that exposed systemic corruption at a California community college. Rafael and Manuel Cortez's mugshots flashed across screens. Rafael stone-faced and silent, Manuel red-eyed and broken. The college released a carefully worded statement expressing deep concern and promising full cooperation with federal authorities. Dean Morrison's name was conspicuously absent. Students were interviewed on camera, their reactions ranging from shock to vindication to anger that it had taken federal intervention to stop abuse everyone had known about for years. We told them, one freshman said, her voice shaking. We told security, we told professors, we told administration. Nobody listened until someone died. But amid the chaos and media circus and federal processing, one figure remained notably absent. Laurel Myers had disappeared. In a safe house 20 miles from campus, Laurel sat at a small kitchen table, staring at the evidence folder Collins had given her. Inside were photographs of Tyler, not the graduation photo she kept, but crime scene images from the night he'd died. The hospital room, the pills they'd found in his pocket, the toxicology report showing lethal levels of fentanyl, and beneath those, a new photograph, a blurry surveillance image of a man in an expensive suit, face partially obscured, standing in what looked like a Mexico City penthouse. A single word was typed beneath it: Spectre. Laurel's phone buzzed. A text from Collins. You did good today, Myers. Tyler would be proud. Take the week. Rest. Heal. Then we talk about Mexico City. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she opened her locket. Tyler's photo smiling back at her. Frozen at 19, forever young, forever gone. I got them, she whispered to the image. Manuel, Rafael, everyone who hurt you. But it's not over. There's more. And I'm going to finish this. Outside, the California sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Inside, Laurel Myers closed the folder and began planning her next move. Justice had come to Crescent Valley. But revenge? That was just the beginning. The chaos had finally subsided into an eerie quiet. Emergency lights still pulsed red and blue through the cafeteria windows, casting rhythmic shadows across overturned chairs and abandoned lunch trays. Students had been cleared out an hour ago, shepherded by campus security and crisis counselors. Now only federal agents remained, cataloging evidence and processing the scene that would reshape Crescent Valley forever. Laurel stood in the dimly lit corridor adjacent to the cafeteria, her back pressed against cool concrete. She'd removed the hidden transmitter from her collar, the tiny device now dark and silent in her palm. Her other hand trembled slightly, the first visible crack in the composure she'd maintained for 2 weeks straight. Agent Collins approached with measured steps, his tactical vest removed, badge clipped to his belt. He'd watched the entire operation unfold from the command van, heard every word through her wire, seen Manuel's breakdown through the live camera feed students had unknowingly provided. You did good, Myers, he said quietly, standing beside her rather than facing her directly. Clean operation. Both Cortez brothers in custody. Evidence chain intact. The DA says it's prosecutable 6 ways from Sunday. Laurel nodded but said nothing. Her throat felt tight. Collins continued, softer now. 73 students identified as victims or witnesses. Financial records seized from Raphael's foundation, showing 2 years of systematic trafficking through campus clubs and off-campus parties. The dean's resignation is effective immediately. His lawyers are already negotiating immunity in exchange for testimony against the distribution network. Good. The word came out hollow. Myers. Collins turned to face her now, his expression shifting from professional to something resembling paternal concern. You completed the mission. Target acquired. Network exposed. That's a win in anyone's book. Laurel's hand moved to her pocket, fingers closing around the small silver locket she'd kept hidden throughout the entire operation. She pulled it out slowly, letting it catch the fluorescent light. With a soft click, it opened. Inside was a photo. A young man with kind eyes and an easy smile, wearing a Crescent Valley hoodie. 19 years old, frozen forever in that moment of hope before everything went wrong. Tyler was my cousin, Laurel whispered, her voice cracking for the first time since Collins had known her. He came here 2 years ago. Scholarship student. First in his family to go to college. He wanted to be a paramedic. Collins stayed silent, letting her speak. He attended one of Raphael's parties. Just one. They told him the pills were safe, party favors, nothing serious. He trusted them. Her thumb traced the edge of Tyler's photo. He died 3 days later in a county hospital. Fentanyl poisoning. The coroner said his heart just stopped. A tear slid down her cheek. The same cheek Manuel had struck hours earlier. She didn't wipe it away. I was finishing combat medic training when I got the call, she continued. I'd taught him basic first aid the summer before. I thought, her breath hitched. I thought if anything ever went wrong, he'd know what to do. But you can't first aid your way out of poison disguised as help. Collins reached out, squeezing her shoulder briefly. Tyler would be proud of what you did today. 73 students won't become statistics because you had the courage to stand in that cafeteria and take that hit. It doesn't bring him back. No, Collins agreed. It doesn't, but it stops the men who killed him from doing it again. Laurel closed the locket with a soft snap, holding it against her chest. For a long moment, she just breathed, in and out, letting the weight of 2 weeks of pretending finally lift from her shoulders. Then Collins cleared his throat, pulling a manila folder from under his arm. I need to tell you something else. Laurel's eyes sharpened, instincts kicking back into gear. We've been monitoring Raphael's communications. He's been reporting to someone higher in the distribution chain. Codename Spectre. Collins opened the folder, revealing surveillance photos and encrypted message logs. We don't have a face yet, but we have locations. Berlin, Prague, and one very recent ping from Mexico City. Laurel took the folder, scanning the documents with practiced efficiency. Her grief hadn't disappeared, but purpose was already reshaping it into something else, something harder and more focused. They're expanding the operation internationally, Collins explained. College campuses across 3 continents. Same playbook. Vulnerable students, legitimate-looking foundations, local enforcers like the Cortez brothers. How many? Laurel asked. Estimated? Hundreds. Maybe more. Laurel stared at Tyler's locket one more time, then tucked it carefully back into her pocket. When she looked up at Collins, her eyes had regained their steel. When do I leave? Collins almost smiled. Berlin. 7 days. New identity being prepared now. Then we keep going, Laurel said, her voice steady again. No more monsters hiding behind school walls. She walked toward the exit, leaving the empty cafeteria behind. But Tyler's mission, her mission, was far from over. Dawn broke over Crescent Valley Community College in shades of amber and rose, painting the campus in deceptively peaceful light. The cafeteria sat empty now, yellow crime scene tape still stretched across its entrance like a scar. By tomorrow it would reopen. Students would return to their routines. But nothing would ever be quite the same. Laurel stood at the edge of the parking lot, a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The only possession she'd arrived with 2 weeks ago, and the only thing she'd leave with now. Her cover identity was being systematically erased. Laurel Myers, forensic biology student, tragic orphan, would vanish from enrollment records by noon. The scholarship that never existed would be quietly withdrawn. The aunt who never lived would fade into administrative footnotes. Behind her, news vans lined the campus perimeter. Headlines were already spreading across social media like wildfire. Federal sting exposes college drug ring. Campus bully arrested in trafficking conspiracy. Undercover agent's 2-week mission brings down cartel operation. Student journalists had cobbled together the narrative from fragments. The mysterious transfer student, the cafeteria confrontation, the dramatic arrests. Some had even posted the viral video. Manuel Cortez, the man who'd terrorized freshmen for 2 years, sobbing on the floor while federal agents read him his rights. The comment sections exploded with reactions. Shock. Vindication. A few defending Manuel until evidence photos surfaced. Then silence from his defenders. Students who'd been too afraid to speak now shared their stories. Threats, assaults, suspicious parties where friends had vanished for days, returning changed and hollow-eyed. Laurel scrolled through her burner phone one last time, reading the testimonies she'd helped bring to light. 73 victims. 73 voices that would finally be heard in court. Her phone buzzed. A new message appeared, encrypted, from a number that didn't exist in any database. Berlin. Flight confirmed. LX 4782. Departs SFO 2300 hours. New identity, Emma Richter. Backstory attached. Target file forwarded. Spectre network operational in EU sector. Estimated 400+ students at risk. Laurel's jaw tightened. 400. The number hit her like a physical blow. A second message followed, this one with an attachment. A surveillance photo of a young woman, no older than 20, her eyes vacant and lost. The caption read, Sophia Werner. 19. Freie Universität Berlin. Missing 6 days. Last seen. Foundation Gala event. Laurel stared at Sophia's face. She saw Tyler in those eyes. That same hope that had been weaponized against him. That same trust that predators had exploited until nothing remained but grief and rage. Myers. She turned. Collins approached, holding 2 disposable coffee cups and a badge case. Thought you might need this before you disappear. He handed her a cup, black, no sugar, exactly how she took it. And this. He opened the badge case, revealing her official federal credentials. You earned them. Director wants you to know the agency doesn't forget operations like this. Laurel took the badge, running her thumb across the embossed seal. For 2 weeks, she'd been nobody, a ghost playing dress-up in student housing. Now she was someone again. Someone with purpose. "Collins," she said carefully. "After Berlin, how many more?" He didn't sugarcoat it. "As many as it takes. Spectre's network has roots in 17 countries. We're building task forces, but we need operatives who can blend in. People who understand what's at stake. People who've lost someone," Laurel finished. "People who refuse to let it happen again," Collins corrected gently. She nodded, accepting the weight of that truth. Tyler's death had broken something in her, but it had also forged something unbreakable. A commitment that transcended personal loss and transformed into systematic justice. 7 days, she confirmed, tucking the badge into her jacket. "I'll be ready." Collins extended his hand. They shook once firmly. "Give them hell, Myers." "Always do." She turned toward the parking lot exit, where an unmarked sedan waited to drive her to the airport. But before stepping away, Laurel looked back one final time at Crescent Valley, at the buildings where students slept and studied, unaware of how close danger had been, how narrowly they'd escaped becoming statistics. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Spectre real name, unknown. Methodology, identical to Cortez model. Targets, scholarship students, international transfers, isolated individuals. Network growing. Time sensitive. Laurel slipped the phone into her pocket beside Tyler's locket. She could feel both against her ribs. The past and the future, grief and purpose, carried together with every step. The campus behind her would heal. Students would laugh again in that cafeteria. Life would move forward. But Laurel Myers, or Emma Richter, or whoever she needed to become next, would keep moving too. Hunting in shadows. Dismantling networks. Finding monsters who hid behind institutional walls and ripping them into daylight. She climbed into the sedan. The driver pulled away without questions. As Crescent Valley faded in the rearview mirror, Laurel whispered to the empty car. To Tyler, to Sophia Werner, to the 400 students she hadn't met yet, but was already sworn to protect. No more hiding. No more silence. The quiet storm continued. And it was just getting started. End. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.